All right, what's going on, guys? We are now live. I am here hosting one of my close family friends, Dr. Supida, as I call her, Jenny Monaikul. Just to give a quick background on who she is and what she's done up to this point, she has her bachelor's in psychology, and she had a focus in biological psychology. She has received her Ph.D. from University of Illinois in toxicology and neuroscience, and her postdoc work is in nutrition and neuroscience. Some of her research right now is focused on brain development and how different exposures can have a positive or negative effect on the brain, ranging anywhere from environmental to nutrition. And I just want to apologize if the video quality is kind of bad right now because the Wi-Fi connection isn't the greatest. So if it is bad, just let me know in the little chat thing on the side. But just some background, how I know her. I've known her since I was 6 years old. My dad actually knew her family, and then we started going to their family restaurant. And since then, we just kind of grown up together. She's given me a lot of life advice, helped me a lot in school, and I just go to her now to just learn and continue to grow from, and just get some great insight on things. So, did you want to add anything about
No,
it?
that was probably more of an introduction than I deserve.
Okay. So yeah, I want to start off. So the whole point of this doing this Q&A was to address something that I've been asked about before in past Q&As, and it's CNS training, and I never really understood what CNS training was or where it came from. So I kind of did some research into that, did my own kind of little take on it, but Jenny here is going to give probably a much better interpretation of some of the questions that I was asked, and just give some of her, again, just her take and background on some of the stuff she studied and is researching now. So basically my understanding of what it is and where it came from, I did some research into, or I did some research into some different studies and read some different articles on kind of what it was, and most of the articles just talked about how CNS training is based from basically overloading and doing low repetition exercises, and basically trying to train power over endurance. So that's kind of the first point that I looked into, and yeah, would you want to kind of give your take on what that means, or what they might be talking about when they say overload or doing low repetition over high rep?
So first start by saying that I am not a kinesiologist, so I am a neuroscientist and toxicologist by training, so when it comes to a lot of things peripheral, specifically muscle endurance and so on and so forth, that is not my area of expertise, but I do know the brain, and I will offer my opinions on that. So the first thing that you mentioned was CNS training in general. I do think that term has been used now to encompass a really broad range of what exercise really is.
Right.
And there have been a lot of studies that have shown the beneficial effects of exercise, especially on neuron birth and generation in the brain, and
telomere length
is very important, and preventing the shortening of telomere length, but also in synaptic plasticity, so helping your brain become more plastic and more adaptable. A lot of research has been done on that. Now, the term CNS training in general, I do think, has come to encompass any sort of exercise from what I've read thus far. And there are a couple of different aspects to that I've noticed people kind of turn to. So there is a difference between just training your muscles to get used to the load that you're bearing or the movement that you're doing, and training in general, just training your mind to be motivated to be able to exert that force comfortably, and to sort of just build your own sense of accomplishment and perception in the amount of force you're exerting and the amount of effort that you're putting into the movement.
Right. So something we're going to get into in a little bit too is mirror neurons, and that kind of goes off of what she was just talking about in terms of just the more of the visualization side of things. but also in the article I was reading, it talked about how if your body had to choose between adapting to one type of training, it would rather rather adapt to endurance rather than power.
Right.
So.
And I think that is that's sort of a default mode, because if your brain and your body thinks it is going to have to do something to sustain a motion or sustain a movement for a period of time, it's going to opt to do the minimal amount of work that will allow for the longest length of exertion.
Okay. So by overloading and doing low repetitions, you're basically going against that whole.
Right. And that could be good or bad. I don't know that there's a ton of research on that, but it could be good or bad. You could be training your body to do, your mind and your body to do something that it's not used to doing.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that if you overload enough, that your brain is going to switch into power mode. It just means that you are training something that is not the default for the brain and the body to do.
Okay. And also in the article, it was talking about how your body would go towards efficiency over proficiency. So is that kind of the same thing as training endurance?
Yeah, so that's the same thing. I mean, it's going to go sort of like energy saving mode. So it is doing the motion that is most efficient, that will allow you to do the motion, but that will allow you to sustain the motion, versus using maximal force and maximal power and having sort of a burst, because those bursts aren't realistically adaptive or sustainable over a long period of time.
You're just training for like one specific, like you said, one burst, so like one movement rather than like running 10 miles.
Right. So if you know that you're going to need to sustain any activity for a long period of time, your body is going to revert, and that could be your brain telling your body, hey, you got a marathon to run, so we're going to conserve muscle energy in this way to
like
stave off fatigue as long as we can. I mean, that's
like we might not move as fast or like run as many sprints. We're just gonna.
You're just gonna. Yes, exactly.
Okay. So another aspect of that article talked about was mirror neurons, and how actually like visualizing something and like thinking you're practicing it can actually improve it over some period of time. And I thought that was really interesting and like almost like unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that. If you want to talk about that, like how.
It's not unbelievable. Mirror neurons are a pretty cool thing. They've been studied a lot. There haven't been a ton of studies that have looked definitively at human mirror neurons.
Okay.
Especially because there's really no way of looking at that. You can't actually study neuron by neuron in a human brain. So a lot of the work has been done in primates specifically, as well as other animals. But so it's not conclusive that humans have mirror neurons. It's not 100% conclusive, but there are studies that suggested, specifically fMRI studies and ECG studies, that can show activation of neural patterns that are that tend to fire when somebody's watching an action or something. But that mirror neurons do exist, and they do respond to action, whether it's being observed or actually being done. And they're adaptive. I mean, they're good because there are several different roles that they can play. You can imitate, you can facilitate learning of an action or a movement. You can potentially read intentions. So if you're watching, let's say a monkey's watching another monkey, the mirror neurons will activate as it is learning and figuring out what that other monkey's doing, and that could be adaptive. It could be a read between this thing's about to attack me versus.
So to correlate this to jumping or basketball, actually one of the TED videos I watched recently, actually, the study they looked at was about, they took two groups, and one of them actually did shot free throws actively over a period of time, and then the other one just visualized it, and they found that both groups actually improved over the same amount of time. So.
But were they at the same level in the end, or did the ones that actually physically did do the task?
If I remember, I think the ones that physically did it improved. That just the fact that they both improved was the part.
By sheer watching or visualizing a movement, that would improve performance.
to me, I'm sure some of you guys out there who are either, working out or training to jump or training to dunk, like, I'm sure there's times where you guys might be sitting there just like thinking, I hope one day I could jump this high, or just visualizing dunking, visualizing getting a heavy weight up or something. I feel like it's good to rehearse that and just practice it mentally before you actually go into it, so that way it's almost like when you go into it, you've already done it.
Yeah.
So it's that much easier.
I mean, and if you think about it too, let's say you're a basketball coach, or you're playing basketball and you're visualizing a play or a screen that could potentially work. I mean, that in and of itself is activating neurons in your brain. It is stimulating different areas of your brain in a way that is hopefully creating and consolidating information such that when it does come time to carry it out, that information is relatively readily available because you've kind of rehearsed it in your head.
Right.
That's not to say that a person that is visualizing something is going to do better than a person that's actually done the act.
Right.
That's important.
It almost seems like sometimes this visualization happens like almost subconsciously, like just at times when you're spacing out, it's like you just start to think through things, like you just said, going through a play. It's almost like before you do it, you just automatically visualize it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that has anything to do with your brain kind of working towards efficiency. Does that like make it easier, maybe like physiologically, for your brain to be like, okay, I've done this in my head, so it's going to be easier when I actually physically do it and have to exert energy. I don't know if that's a stretch.
No, I think that's more an attentional bias.
Okay.
So it is the thoughts that pop in your head. You're not necessarily controlling those thoughts that pop into your head. It's whether or not you choose to pay attention.
Right.
So you're choosing to selectively pay attention to something that you wish to do, and that act is what will help you in the end. I don't know that that's an efficiency thing. I think that's more of paying attention to something that matters, and eventually carrying it out.
Okay. By the way, if you guys have any questions, just leave them in the chat. We will definitely be looking at those and looking to answer those. But I have some questions from the past Q&A I talked about at the beginning. From one of them, from Zhang Ning, I recommended that I have Jenny answer that question before I actually answered it on the Q&A, because I knew we were going to have this conversation. And he asked, how do you know your CNS is recovering, and does more sleep help, or does less sleep hurt?
Okay, so after a bout of training, I don't know that it is necessarily your CNS that needs to recover. I mean, your brain doesn't really feel tired from the exercise, right? It is the fatigue in your muscles and your body that the screen turned black.
Oh. Hello. Can you guys still see the video right now?
I mean, I could keep talking, but I don't know if anybody's receiving.
There we go. Because of the Wi-Fi connection, I almost figured this was going to happen. So we're going to continue this as just like a voice conversation, and I have the recording of the actual, like what we're talking about right now, on a different camera. So we'll just continue it this way since the video went out. But if you guys want to ask any questions, I still have the chat up and everything, so you won't be able to see us, but you'll still be able to hear everything we're saying. So, but I will post an updated version with like clear video, no cuts, basically same thing as you're watching now, after this video, or lack of video.
So to continue that, the recovery period is more for your muscles after training. What your brain, you need sleep. Your body peripherally and centrally needs sleep. Your brain uses sleep as a period for consolidation, so things, sensory experiences, things that you've learned, so on and so forth. The synapses that may or may not have been strengthened or may have been formed, all of that, all these processes require at least some form of rest, and that may be in the form of consolidation during sleep, memory consolidation, and so on and so forth. So yes, sleep is important. It's very important, and lack of sleep will definitely alter your ability to train and perform ultimately in the end. Especially if you're tired, you're going to lack coordination.
Right.
That's all CNS, and it's also muscle fatigue. And your body just hasn't had time to recover. So sleep is very important.
So would you say anything that's like CNS training, CNS recovery, CNS fatigue, like has that been all just correlated to just, like you said at the beginning, specific training more than just actually having to do with central nervous system?
I mean, I think part of the not the problem, but part of the reason it's been called that is because your central nervous system plays an inextricable role in all of training. Your brain controls pretty much everything between your brain and your heart, right? I mean, that's what you need to function. I mean, as well as every other system. But I think that the reason CNS fatigue and CNS training and all of those things have come to be such a big part of exercise is because people realize that, hey, you need your brain to be able to perform these functions.
Right.
And between, down to your motor cortex communicating with your spinal cord to your muscles, like that is CNS. And so you can just call it fatigue, or you can just call it, but fatigue can be also muscle fatigue versus motivational fatigue, or being unable to transmit that signal efficiently because you're tired, and
so basically they've just drawn it all to like the powerhouse pretty much.
Yeah, it is just kind of, it's categorizing, but they're huge categories.
Right.
Peripheral fatigue versus central fatigue.
Right. Alright, I'm going to take a second really quick to see if I could bring this video back for you guys. Alright, we're back from that brief intermission. Thank you for still being with us if you are.
Totally my fault. I dragged him up to the northern tip of Wisconsin, and there is not great Wi-Fi here.
It is, yeah. So if it goes out again, I think we're probably just going to leave it to voice. And like I said, full video will be posted after this without that brief intermission. But just to continue on with the questions.
That intermission was so long, I've forgotten everything neuroscience. I'm a blank slate now.
She's going to have to go back to school to get her Ph.D.
Yeah.
Anyway. So we're going to continue with the questions. So some questions here I came up with from the articles I read and the research that I looked into, and then other ones are from people who asked in past Q&As and past videos I've done about CNS and like telling me to look into it and stuff. So just going to continue to the next question. From Tyler James, he asked, could training with bad form impact CNS? And like at the beginning we were talking about how like focus plays a role in maybe like how you move a certain way, or like just coordination in general. So could training with bad form have any impact on CNS, or is it more like the other way around, or is it more just focusing again like on the movement?
I think there's a person walking behind us. Training with bad form, I think, is more of an issue, and again, I'm not a kinesiologist, but I think that is more of an issue of potentially injuring yourself. So I'm not sure that it necessarily would correlate to your brain encoding something weird, right? I mean, your brain, the motor cortex, as you perform a function, it's going to send signals to whatever muscles that you are activating at that time, or that you need to activate. So if anything, I mean, bad form is just going to screw you up in terms of putting you potentially closer to injury.
So maybe like he was getting at in terms of like impacting CNS, like would like by you training something with the wrong form. I guess let's take it to the extent of like you're doing the wrong form and you could potentially injure yourself eventually because the form is just that wrong. Like would that keep you from maybe like advancing or practicing to get better
So that,
And-
yeah, I mean, that's just a habit thing, right? So it's like breaking a habit. If you have bad form, you can retrain your own muscle memory, as people call it, but you can retrain yourself to correct that form.
Right.
It's not gonna, just because, I mean, if you've learned the form the wrong way and you've been doing it that way for a very long time, it might be harder to just tell yourself to do something, and that, I mean, that's just as hard as breaking a lifelong habit, right? But it's not going to be a detriment to your brain necessarily. It'll be more of a detriment to
like how you perform
your body. Yeah. I mean, and it also, if we're looking at indirect effects on CNS, it could just be that you're performing something wrong and it hurts more, or you're not seeing the gain, or you're not feeling, it doesn't feel good when you do it, or something like that. That could just affect your motivation, which would then just feed forward down to whether or not you want to perform that act. So if you're performing it correctly and you're seeing the gain you want to see and it feels good when you do it, and so on and so forth, you're going to be willing to add it into more of your exercises. But if every time you do it, you tweak your knee or something, you're not going to want to do it later on. So that it could affect the brain in terms of motivation and in that respect.
Okay. So to go off like that muscle memory, so in that TED video that I was talking about, with like the mirror neurons and the free throw shooters and stuff, it also talked about how muscle memory really is just the repeated practice of a certain of basically like building a skill.
Yeah.
So it's like,
that's exactly what.
So it's like that.
Yeah.
So if you could talk about, is it that pathways are created, or is it that the signaling is better, so that if you stop doing it for an extended amount of time, that when the term muscle memory usually comes in, where it's like, oh, it'll just come back.
Right.
Like, is that from you having created pathways, or have pathways that are more efficient than just like an average person, or?
That is, it's kind of hard to say, because I would say that muscle memory is facilitated by that repeated action in practice, in training, allows your muscles to just adapt to that movement. And part of that too is signaling from your brain through your spinal cord to your muscles, knowing what it needs to do. And exercise in and of itself can help in neurogenesis, so creation of new neurons, but can also help in strengthening cell-to-cell communication. And
so I mean, with maybe a lot of people watching, or would practicing like jumping over and over again, and like as you get better at that, is it like, are you getting better? I mean, it could be multiple things, but are you getting better because muscle activation is getting better, or is it because pathways are getting more efficient?
I think it's a little bit of everything. So it's not that every time you go and work out, you're going to create a neuron or create a series of neurons or build and strengthen synapses. That's not going to be the case every time. But you have potentiation of signals. You have signals that can become more efficient, or you can have more firing of signals in response to an act. A lot of that can come from just the sheer act itself. It can come from neurotransmitter synthesis, release, so on and so forth, due to the rewarding effects that you feel. All in all, I think training is one of those processes that will affect your body in a lot of different ways, between motivation, reward, so brain specifically, and then down to creating
just a connection.
Yeah, not creating one, but strengthening connections, and maybe making communication a little more efficient if there is potentiation of a signal, or so on and so forth. So that in that way, I think training is very important.
Okay. Guys, don't get thrown off by like anything that sounds complicated, but I just I don't know, like these are the types of Q&As, I want to start doing more and start kind of digging more into things, because the more I feel like the more you dig into something, the more interesting it becomes, and just the more you can learn from it. With something as simple as CNS training, people it's thrown out there, and I feel like there's a lot of generalizations. So I think it's cool to kind of get down to the nitty gritty and like actually see like where that label came from.
Yeah.
So.
And if you have any questions, just put them in the comment box and we can respond to them. Or if anything is over your head or needs clarification, we can do that.
So to get to another question, this is kind of a little longer one, but so I've read multiple studies that suggest motor cortex plays a role in muscle strength and coordination. So to go back to what we were talking about earlier, could this be why loading and doing low repetitions could be more beneficial to work more CNS, because it takes more control of like the movement over just doing like a pacing type of movement?
I don't know that I can answer that specifically. I mean, I can give you a little bit of insight on the motor cortex,
right?
But in terms of
how it's activated,
right? But in terms of low rep at at high weight, or high rep at low weight, I can't really speak to that. But the motor cortex deals a lot with voluntary movement. So it is a loop. Almost all of what the brain does can feed forward and feed back. And so as let's say you're directing a movement. When you direct a movement, the signal comes from the motor cortex down your spinal cord to whatever limb or part of your body you need to move, and then it moves it. So it sends that signal via that pathway. Neurons can atrophy. A lot of unfortunate neurodegenerative diseases do that, and so those neurons can atrophy, so you might lose the ability to communicate. And
is that from not performing like a certain movement, or could you just be born with that like that?
The neurodegenerative diseases, those are generally not an issue of whether or not you're using. It's not a use it or lose it type of thing. But your muscles can atrophy if you don't use them.
Right.
So the people who are extremely sedentary can lose muscle mass and fibrosity and so on and so forth. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you are working to strengthen a muscle, you're just repeatedly sending signals, right? And what you're doing is you're strengthening the muscles and potentially strengthening those signals and the communication along that pathway that's occurring between the neurons and the ganglion and your spinal cord, and all of those feed forward or feedback processes.
So would you say that's why when something starts to feel easier, is that why like you might increase the load, or start performing different types of movements that might kind of test your body in ways that you haven't tested it yet? Like, is it to kind of like push those pathways in a sense, or create new ones, or would it just strengthen ones that are already made and just kind of be like a branching off of that?
Yeah, those pathways are there and they're formed, right? The pathway from your brain to the ganglion to the limbs and parts of your body, those are there, and you can strengthen or potentially weaken them. But a lot of, what did you just say? You said, a movement becoming easier.
Right.
I think a lot of that is just training your body, just training your legs to know what that movement feels like. But in terms of the brain, when you perform a movement, it is a novel, let's say it's a novel, brand new movement, it'll just become easier by virtue of practice. The same way, you can, when you start learning piano or something, and just getting those motions down. So it's a little bit of everything that goes into that. It is your brain sending the signals to tell you what you need to do, grasping what it is that you need to do. In piano, learning a new piece.
Right.
So, reading the notes to actually sending that signal to actually move your fingers to where they need to be, and that coordination. Each time you practice a song, it's just going to get easier because that you're just processing it faster because of the practice.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go through and look at any of the remaining questions I have on here. And if you guys have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. Again, I apologize for the last video going out, but there will be another video of this in full posted after the full Q&A. So another question I have written down is, to what extent do nerves control muscle contraction, and if it's a large part, then could that be why like higher velocity training might be better than like doing a movement slower?
Okay. So yeah, quick answer is that nerves do control muscle contraction. So when the motor cortex sends a signal down to eventually get to your muscles, that creates a release of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, which then the muscles will respond to. There is some suggestion that there is a feedback loop too, that when muscles are performing a certain act, there is a metabolite that is formed due to the excretions of the muscle, and then that feeds back and tells your brain, hey, this is happening right now, right? But those loops, regardless of what compound is being synthesized and what's being read, those loops happen. So yes, your nerves initiate and respond to, and your brain responds to everything that's happening on your body when your muscles extend or contract. In terms of explain high velocity training.
So basically, high velocity training, there's with a lot of the training that goes into jumping that's talked about, that's like the best type of training to do for jumping is the higher load, low rep, higher velocity, which means just moving that load as fast as possible. So by moving a heavier load as fast as possible, would that somehow engage greater like nerve stimulation or nerve signaling compared to doing like a lower or doing maybe like a lighter weight faster, or like more endurance type of training?
Okay. That one's a little hard, only because in terms of training, yeah. I don't really know how that fully relates to one another. I mean, I know that it's important. So I will say,
okay,
yeah.
So maybe just like doing any movement in that manner, then like if you were to do any movement faster, like does that require more nerve stimulation? Because I feel like maybe intuitively it seems like it would, but
yeah. So nerve stimulation or the communication of nerves is required for a movement of a muscle, but the speed at which your muscles perform and act doesn't translate to your nerves
signaling any faster.
Yeah, your nerves don't signal any faster. It's really more of a frequency of stimulation.
Okay.
So it could be, this is speculation, but it could be that as you train and you do that high velocity training and you're moving a greater load, lower reps as fast as you can, it could be that you eventually those nerve fibers eventually fire more in response to whatever action you're trying to carry out.
So by fire more, do you mean like fire a greater number of times in a certain period of time?
Right. Okay. So each time
they don't actually move faster.
Right.
It's just
so
more often.
Let's just real quick into just quick neuroscience. So you have a neuron, you have a cell body, and then you have this axon, and then you have these little things called dendrites, and the dendrites are where the signals actually transmit. And dendrite to dendrite communication is generally what people refer to as a synapse.
Mm-hmm.
And so once the cell is activated by a voltage, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'll either, it's called an all or none response. So either there will be a signal that gets fired or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that signal gets fired, it conducts through the axon out to the dendrites, and then the dendrites will release a neurotransmitter in response to this conduction, depending on what the neuron is. And
so basically saying like move in some kind of way.
So let's say we're talking muscle fibers. You know, if the signal is being conducted, it moves down the axon, it will release acetylcholine, and that is what your muscles are responding to.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the neurotransmitters that are released by that impulse. So by doing something over and over, you don't really speed up the conduction of that signal. So that propagation of that signal is a relatively constant speed for a neuron, for each neuron. But what you can do to continuously activate a muscle is if you just continuously depolarize that cell and make it fire, it'll just keep firing. So then you're just going to keep getting release of acetylcholine, if that makes sense, or of whatever neurotransmitter.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So instead of speed, it is frequency.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can that be, I wouldn't say perfected, but can that be kind of improved by, through practice like we talked about, like doing something more often?
It can. So there is potentiation. There are things that can affect a cell's ability to have like a short refractory period and get fire again.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways to do that. I don't know. I can't say that, okay, just because you do this exercise over and over again, that's what's going to happen.
Okay. So we actually asked Jenny's brother, who speaks multiple languages, what your name was, because I can't read those letters, but he said it was Zhang Ning. Is that right? We did talk about your question. We did bring up your question about how do you know your CNS is recovering. Is that the question you asked last time? By the way, we're probably going to wrap up this live stream in a few minutes, so if you guys have any last minute questions you want to get in before we end the live stream, just feel free to put them in the chat, and we will get to them before the end of the live stream. Okay, so Zhang Ning, we did talk about that. Maybe if you want to just like give a little summary of what he asked before.
Yeah. So you asked whether
he asked
how you know the CNS has recovered in sleep.
Yeah, in terms and does sleep have any, like, does it help to have more sleep? Does it hurt to have less sleep?
To very quickly summarize what I said, I don't think that after a training session that your CNS needs recovery necessarily. It's not that your brain. It's not that. Yeah, it's not that your brain is fatigued in terms of your training for that day, but your brain, I mean, your whole body physiologically, peripherally, and centrally needs sleep. Your brain needs sleep to consolidate all of that sensory information and all of the information that you've taken in for the day. Your body, your muscles specifically, if we're talking about a training session, needs sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's no real way of being like, well, my CNS has recovered after training.
Yeah.
But you do need sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, and I'm sure those of us who've pulled all-nighters or who just haven't gotten enough sleep, you don't train or perform as well the next day because you need your brain to be at its best to be able to fire most efficiently and to respond quickly. Your attention, your motor coordination, all of that matters.
Plus, isn't sleep up there with the top 4 things we need before doing anything else? It's
pretty much. Yeah.
Like if we're tired and we're trying to decide between working out and sleeping, I feel like most of us might be like, yeah, okay, I'm feeling a little tired today. Maybe I won't go as hard, or maybe I just won't work out completely. So
Yeah,
Maybe
but
it's
if you're not gonna go hard, then
right.
So
Go hard
you
or
might
go
as well
home.
exactly. So you might as well
Go home and go to sleep.
if your body's telling you it's tired and
Yeah.
it needs to rest. I mean, that aside from just being lazy,
Mhm.
there's a difference between being tired and being lazy.
Right. Yeah.
But if your body feels tired, or if your head is just in a fog and you don't
Right.
feel like you can give 100%, that is a signal that hey, you need
Okay.
some sleep.
So maybe not saying specifically CNS recovery, but
Just recovery.
CNS adaptation. Is that more of like maybe a way to? or
We should just get away from saying CNS anything.
anything?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, your brain needs time to recover. If you think about the amount of sleep a newborn baby gets,
Mhm.
they need that time. Everything
So much
that newborn,
stimulation, yeah.
everything a newborn experiences is brand new,
Yeah.
and so it has to sleep to
Right.
consolidate all that information.
Especially if you're continually trying to push yourself in from maybe like a weight you can do, or in this case like how high you could jump, like if you're constantly like trying to push new adaptations, like it's obviously going to be more.
Yeah, there's also a
Training.
point where your muscles will fatigue, so it's not just central. It's peripheral. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're hitting lactic threshold, or your legs, if you're just tired, there's a point where you can't push yourself any further
Mhm.
without some rest.
All right, so Hillel asks, can someone have quicker CNS than another, or something like that?
Everybody's brain is different. So
Plus, I mean, isn't there like there's like millions upon millions of neurons? Like,
there
how
are
would you
a lot
actually
of
be able to count,
neurons.
like,
Yeah, there
differences?
are a lot of neurons in the brain, so it's very difficult to quantify that speed. So you really wouldn't just sit down with 20 people and be like, I'm grouping you into the fast processing and I'm going to group you into slow processing.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. But people.
Maybe doing certain things, like maybe you ask them to perform something.
Yeah,
you
so a
kind of relate
task.
it to
So I
having
mean,
quicker. I mean, maybe it's related to like the motor cortex. Like, maybe if one person has done whatever movement you're asking them to do, maybe if one person's done that movement more, it'll seem like they have quicker CNS.
it could be. I mean, it could be through training.
Yeah.
If you have a completely novel motion
Mhm.
or a novel action that you're asking somebody to do, there will inevitably be people who can perform it faster than others, but that's not just necessarily a brain thing. I mean, the conduction will be different, right? So some people might conduct faster than others. But that's not to say that it's a grouping. It's just that it could just be that for that specific movement, that person is faster, but they could be slower at conducting in another movement. So it's hard to really just say somebody's brain is quicker than another,
Yeah.
outside of a diseased brain, of course.
Right.
But in normal individuals, what could be faster for some person could be, they could be lacking in some other area
Right.
that another person who was slower in that first motion can be faster at.
And Hillel, I think like from what I've been getting from this conversation, just other times we've talked, it's just, it seems like the body, it's not just, I feel like getting away from the CNSs would be better, because your body just doesn't work with one thing. It's like
Right.
you have to if you want to perform anything, any action.
It is
You
an
need-
integration
yeah.
of a lot of things. I mean, each process, it's not, when you perform any, let's say we're talking about jumping specifically, it's not just going to be your motor cortex
Mhm.
that activates. It's going to be one that lights. So put you in an MRI or something. It will be one that lights up predominantly. I guess you wouldn't be in an MRI if you're trying to jump, but that whole idea is, it's not that just one area of your cortex is activated at any time. At any given moment, neurons are just firing. I mean, you have your autonomic system, so you have things that are going on in the background, just keeping you alive at any given moment. So it really is an integrated process between your brain communicating with your muscles, and your muscles communicating back to your brain. It's really, and not just, your heart, everything plays a role. Your lungs,
Right.
breathing capacity, all of that stuff.
So yeah, so I feel like that's why it's good to get away from these like specific like CNS training, or like this training or this
Right.
training. It's like, whole body.
Yeah, it really is just
Yeah.
training.
Right.
Yeah, because no matter what, your brain's going to be involved, and no matter what, your muscles are going to be involved.
Right.
So categorizing it is probably not the best
Yeah.
way.
You're gonna be breathing. Your heart's gonna be pumping.
Yeah,
right?
everything is
Yeah.
working. Yeah, it was a good question though.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Oh, Sangning, he said thanks. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
All right. Let's see. Any more questions? Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, I think we're gonna wrap up the live stream. If you do have anything else to add,
No, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Thank you for being
it
on
made sense. Yes,
the
this
stream.
is great.
Sorry that it got cut into 2 parts. I will definitely work on getting these better. Well, I mean, I guess having better Wi-Fi.
Yeah, sorry
would
about
help.
that.
No,
That's on me.
no, it'll. Maybe we'll do something like this again if you guys have suggestions for future
Yeah.
Q&As with Dr. Supida Monaikul, who I found out just doesn't like to be called doctor.
I
so don't call her doctor. All right. Thank you guys
Bye.
for tuning in.
Thank you.